I think we will have time for thank yous later on, but I think we've had a good 2 days of conversation. This is our closing panel. It's a roundtable on the future of the media and democracy in Africa. So we've talked about the challenges, the hostile press freedom climate globally. We've identified the commonality of the problems that we face. I think we so we can end on a good note as well. And the imagination is that we will move from a conversation to action points. What can be done? So we will start by maybe giving Fatou. We have 4 people on the roundtable: Sadibou Marong from the Sub-Saharan Africa Director of Reporters Without Borders, and Fatou Touray, Kerr Fatou TV. William, yes, still with us, Secretary General of the Congress of African Journalists, and Mohamed Abdelfattah. And I think this will give us an opportunity to round up both, leaders in the media, and I'm hoping that each can speak for 5 to 7 minutes, and then we can turn it out for a general conversation on the way forward. Let's start with Fatou.
Okay, thank you. I think we have looked at most of the challenges we face in the media and democracy in Africa. But I think I see the future that is going to be courageous, unapologetic, and community-driven. With the challenges we face with donor support and drying of funding, I think the media is going to be more proactive. It is for us to be more innovative and works on ways of improving crowdfunding and how we can improve on also content. But I think first, we must have a strong and independent media. We must have a strong opposition and a very vibrant civil society. This is the foundation of any democracy. In countries where you have a very weak opposition, very weak media, you cannot have democracy. So that is why it is important to have a strong independent media, vibrant civil society, and also a strong opposition. That this is how you will be able to strengthen the future. But I think also, we're going to have a strong, we're going to have a very strong future for our democracy in Africa, because the people are very much energized. The young people are committed. For example, in the Gambia a few years ago, we don't participate in whatever happens in our country. But recently, what we have seen when policies are taken to the National Assembly, when laws are taken, there was this instance where there were increment to the judiciary's salaries and pay scale of judiciary. The young people mobilized themselves and went to the assembly to confront National Assembly members. And this really stopped the assembly members from passing that law. That is how energized the young people have been and how committed they have been. And that only strengthens democracy. What happened in Senegal also when the president just canceled their elections, and how the young people went out and the civil society and opposition leaders went out, determined that their laws must be respected, there must be elections. That kind of inspiring zeal from the population is what we have seen across in Africa, in Ghana. The people were frustrated with the economic struggles in other countries. And what we have seen is a committed population, a committed opposition that helped to effect change. So I think what we have seen in Africa is people energized, people committed to the democratic principles, people committed to holding governments accountable. But with a strong opposition and independent media, these things will be attained. But I think first, there are some crises, there are some issues that we must confront. The crisis of legitimacy and electoral controversies. these are things that really threaten our democracy, where electoral processes are not transparent. The media must take center stage in exposing these issues that are happening, especially when there are elections, where there are malpractices, where there are other issues that threaten our democracy. The media must be strong, and civil societies must be open to coming out and exposing this. For example, I think we said it in elections in Africa, these election observers come and they just spend 2 or 3 days in our countries. At the end of the election, they'll say the elections are free and fair. But what have our own civil society and election observers observed? Because they have been there the entire process. So they must take leading roles in these times and make sure they tell us the true reflection of what they have seen. We must take center stage in these issues when we are confronted. We must not just rely on outside observers, but I think the people will trust more our local civil society members and media personnel who will be able to tell the story because they have been witness to this. Press freedom, we have said how it has been a challenge in countries, especially in countries like Sudan, Cameroon, Zimbabwe, where we have seen draconian laws, where we have seen shutdown of internet and other issues happening. I think what the media should be doing is having broader collaborations. This is very important for us to be able to support each other, because we just cannot isolate ourselves in one corner and hope that everybody else is enjoying the same freedoms that we are enjoying. We have seen what is happening, like he said, in Senegal. Some of the news outlets are struggling to pay salaries right now, because when the new government came, they have put on hold everything that is paid to these media houses. Some of them, in fact, I watched one of the interviews with the president where Maimouna Ndour Faye was explaining how government want them to pay taxes, but government is also owing them monies that they have not paid back to them. So these are challenges, even though we most of us believe this government is very, very, should be a democratic government because what they went through, but also you could see the element of power creeping in little by little, how they also want to exercise their presence. And I think that is why we have to have more collaborations among journalists from different countries, because the pen is mightier. The pen is still mightier, and the more we use it, I think the better for us. But I also believe that fundings, donations that have been taken away will make us even more innovative. Because at the end of the day, we love this job and we believe in it. So I think sometimes we believe we are scared with all of this happening, how our donors have taken everything away and sponsorships are gone. But again, it's teaching us to be more innovative. And that is why we need to have more training in the newsrooms, especially in the digital media, and also be able to help each other, like I said, in collaborating and creating more avenues for where media platforms are able to sustain themselves without going down the drain of always looking for money. But we're able to create avenues where we can. The more independent you are, the more you are able to hold government accountable. And how are you able to do that? Create ways of having funds for yourself instead of just asking from donors. I think the future for democracy is bright. We have a vibrant young people in the continent who are more energized today. But I think we just need to still keep pressing on. The more we press on, the better it is for the continent. Thank you.
Okay, so we can take William, since you've been waiting. Thank you for being so patient. The time difference is huge.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Thanks. I hope you are hearing me.
Yes.
Yeah. I think let me start by saying that I believe in an Africa that is rising. That increasingly many of us believe Africa is rising. Africa is going to change. Africa is going to change significantly on a positive trajectory. And at the Congress of African Journalists, we are approaching the whole question of media and democracy in Africa in a much more positive sense, because we want to encourage journalists to engage. We want to engage African governments. We want to engage with the African Union. We want to engage with all its agencies and to mobilize the African, journalists and all media actors to say that we have a contribution to make in changing Africa, in changing the narrative. And in doing that, we are actually persuading journalists, including the ones who are writing for foreign media, that we need to tell the African story differently. For far too long, we have had, the stories that are being told of Africa by the international media and using our own people have been negative. This really must change, because it is not all negativity in Africa. Yesterday, of course, we discussed the status of democracy and all the challenges that we have had before. But I think we all recognize that there's a silver lining in many of those, in many countries. The state of democracy is struggling, but it is improving significantly in a number of countries. And even governments that were resistant to change, that did not want to listen to the people, are increasingly listening to the people. And I think, as my sister has indicated, there's much more civic engagement by the younger people. And this one is a very, very good show, because it means that the leaders will keep being challenged. And therefore, they will need to know that improving the systems of governance will be important. And that also goes with this civic engagement has been enabled by the media, both the legacy media and, of course, right now, technology, which has enabled the media to reach many more people. Yeah, so at the democracy level, at the level of talking about democracy in Africa, I think we must remain extremely positive. We at the Congress of African Journalists are looking at it in terms of aligning with the African Union agenda of 2063. And the discussions are that there are many things happening at the economic, social, and even political, levels that need to be told much more accurately than they have been told before. And that means, therefore, that the media has a very, very important role. Now, in terms of the media and going forward, the recommendation would be that there is need for more robust mobilization of the African media, journalists, media organizations, media advocacy groups. We need to mobilize ourselves very, very robustly to be able to assert the position of the media and say that it is important for the media to remain independent. It is important for the media to continue holding the leaders accountable. And that in situations where there are even no effective opposition parties, the media then remains a critical, player and opportunity for people who want to hold leaders and governments accountable. So that is an important point. The issue of mobilization of the media sector, all the players, and generally to increase the convening power of the different players that there are. In fact, you may need to recognize that there's right now more conversation among African media stakeholders than before, enabled by technology. Even during COVID, I remember during COVID at the Congress of African Journalists, and that is when we were found to respond to that situation, we were able to mobilize big virtual meetings during which we were able to analyze the situation in Africa. And we're able to know, for example, that there were 12,000 African journalists that were affected by COVID in one way or another. And we stood with them. We mobilized them, we urged them, and then other interventions came to try to help. The other thing I wanted to say is that I think we'll need greater support. We'll need greater support. This support can be in terms of solidarity, can be in terms of opportunities to speak, like what we have now. This Brown University in this case and Watson Institute, this convening is an important support because we are able to tell you what is happening in Africa. I'm sure that after these 2 days, you have a completely different idea about how Africa is. You appreciate the challenges that there are, and then you are able to now begin to contextualize the kind of responses that you can make and the kind of engagement. Yesterday, actually, we did even challenge American journalists and, of course, those from other Western countries that they need to move away from the comfort zones that they have had before. They need to begin interrogating their systems more. Just like we are trying to interrogate ours, the comfort that you have had about a working democracy must now change. And you can learn lessons from us about the kind of resilience, the kind of passion and courage that we have exhibited in the face of challenge. I think the other thing is that we will need innovation. I think my sister there has talked about that. The issue of innovation, we can never, as a media sector in Africa, do things the way it has always happened. So the issue of bringing in technology, AI, and more training, looking at the intergenerational issues, because even within the media space, we have the old guard, and then we have the new young people. How do we bring them on board? Even in a setup like my sister's media ecosystem in Gambia. Suppose she were to leave, does the media die? I mean, there needs to be some kind of succession plan, So that is something that we need to look at, the innovation, the resilience, and we need to build the capacity of the African journalists across all those generations so that then we have no gap. Maybe the second last thing is that I think the issue of sustained engagement between African media sector players and the global environment is very important for learning purposes. How has it been in Europe? How has it been in America? How is it in Asia and in Latin America? Latin America, there have been a fairly activist media, in the past. Even in Asia, there are countries where there's quite some activist media challenging certain things, like my sister from Ghana. Environmental issues, environmental journalism has become the center of attention because of challenging very powerful people. So the engagement between Africa and the global community, especially at the media level, and that also speaks to democracy, because the two must really go together. And then I think our friend from CPJ talked about an important thing about solidarity. Global solidarity is very, very important. I need to inform him that we work very closely with your team in Africa, Toki, Angela, and all the others. And sometimes we do joint statements. When they request us, we've got to come together and sign statements that are fairly powerful. And then these ones, we are able to disseminate them to governments, African Union, African Commission on Peoples and Human Rights, and these have yielded certain results. And when it comes to advocacy, like ourselves at the Congress of African Journalists, we team up with Sadibou and the other Article 19 and all the others. So the question of solidarity is equally important, because it just doesn't speak about media freedom. It speaks to freedom of expression, access to information, and therefore, the three put together are very, very essential in terms of holding the leadership and other, powerful groups in Africa, to account. So I think I want to stop there and say that this solidarity we're talking about means that we want to have it across board. And I think earlier on we discussed during one of the panels the issue of the academy and the media. So that is critical. So if we can have more engagements between the universities and across in Africa, in America, and all the other areas, it means therefore that we can also begin to inspire the young generation that were asking questions yesterday. And today I can see some of them. They should be able to learn and take over from us so that we have continuity. Yeah, thanks.
Yes, thank you very much. So we can take Sadibou, Marong, and then we move to Mohamed, Abdelfattah, closing comment. Yeah.
Thank you again, Chernoh. I would like to share some kind of perspectives. And first of all, I will begin with a kind of country profile. Currently, if we had to draw a country profile of a kind of media and democracy profile for those countries in African countries, we'll see something which is more or less common of all countries. For example, on paper, you will see the country has ratified some international covenants on human rights. And you will see, if you have a look at the constitutions, you will see the country has recognized free speech, freedom of expression, press freedom. You will see, for example, the country has signed XYZ African tools in order to safeguard, independence of media freedom, and so on. So this is something which is more or less common to many of African countries, except some like Eritrea and like the others. Even if Eritrea, for example, they will. I have met some of their commissioners, and they were trying to accept the fact that they are press freedom respect country. This is just to introduce my perspective and to see how this is common, but it is just on paper. Unfortunately, when you go on the ground, the reality is other. You will see, for example, if those countries, they have press codes, for example, and many of those press codes, for example, they have prevented journalists arrested in the course of their work to be sent to jail, for example, with some moratoriums and so and so. But you will see how those countries, they are also trying to bypass the country's press code, for example, by setting up cybercrime law. And those cybercrime law also with a lot of provisions, very, very dangerous provisions, which might, put journalists into jail. And this is the first thing. There is also the issue of anti-terror laws, also with very draconian provisions, which those countries which perceive themselves as democratic countries are using. Because they have the majority seats at parliament, and so the vote has been quite easy. You will also see how internet shutdowns, which is more or less something happening in the last 10 years, are very common. We have seen a lot of examples yesterday from the Zimbabwe to Gabon and from other countries, even including Senegal. You will see how control and censorship of media is more and more taking place in those countries, which depict themselves as democratic countries. You will see also how they are also encouraging kind of pro-governmental outlets, with the different that those other outlets are the enemies, and these pro-governmental are our friend, and we're going to support them. And this is how the situation is. And this is to introduce and say, okay, it's quite, it might be quite problematic if we stick there. But this is the very ugly side of the situation, as media, democracy are something which are very linked. We can't say a democratic country without media, and recognize that the press freedom is the cornerstone of the democracy. Fortunately, we are in many contexts where these have been hijacked by all those themselves who are very one who were appointed to protect media, to protect the press freedom. And they are not only protecting press freedom, as they are not only hijacking press freedom, but they are also arresting journalists. They are not arresting journalists, but they are even putting them to jail. Some journalists are not assassinated, but they are killed because they have been identified as journalists in the course of their work. These problematic situations should be reflected from my perspective, and just let us know that and take into consideration the fact that while media are, is important in Africa, democracy also important in Africa. We need to take into consideration that by the same time, there are other actors who are there who don't have any interest to see media grow, to see democracy grow, and this is quite problematic. We also have seen the impact of those hijacking during election. I have talked about internet shutdown, but we also how the control of the information also has taken place with the birth and the creation of a lot of satellite media during election times. Those media might have a kind of 2 to 3 months durations, and after the elections, they will be they will just be stopped their publication. This is to say, politicians and political actors, they have always been undermining the reliability of the information and the integrity of the information in the most important democratic life of the African nations, which are the election. This is also something we have observed. We also have observed that in countries where with never-ending rulers, like, for example, Cameroon, where the president has been there up to 40 years now. Other countries where elections have been, postponed several times. Other countries where, military juntas are there. We can see how in those countries like Cameroon, for example, how the media has been negatively used by those who are supposed to be the media protectors. And so this is something which is really, really hijacking democracy. And these are lifelong leaders also with a lot of negative effects on the media. But despite that, what I have depicted, I think there is hope. There is hope because we have seen the creation and the emergence of a vibrant media community from Fatou to Senozo in Burkina Faso, or from, let's say, like, I don't know, maybe any outlet in Kenya to another outlet in Tanzania, or from, South Africa to Senegal. The emergence of those people who believe in media and who think, despite this, whatever the situation, whatever difficulty the situation is, their role is to be journalists and to provide information and with all its integrity and reliable information. And these are, this is media we need to support and to stand up for in front of all those authoritarian people who are trying to who have been hijacked. We also have seen the emergence of whistleblowers and then the emergence of any kind of positive examples in Africa with either whistleblowers or either journalists using online media, using also their social media networks and so with the aim to provide information and good information and reliable information. This is also to be encouraged. And then we have seen how oppositions, they have been leaders and opposition people, they have been prevented from accessing to media for years and years, namely state-run media or some independent media, which are in accordance with other people. These are also have been some problems, but the hope is there from my perspective. The media will still exist. despite the fact that AI is here with its limits, despite any other challenges, the media will still take place. And democracy also will be something on which African nation will be trying to aim. And to stand up for democracy, people need the solidarity. And I pick up that word from Mohamed from his presentation earlier. Solidarity is something which it is extraordinarily important. And then solidarity by media association networks, solidarity among journalists, African journalists themselves, those who believe in journalism, on journalism, because despite the lack of means, for example, journalists will tell you, okay, we don't have means, we don't have this, but it is always possible to develop networks. For example, if you want to cover something in a remote area and you don't have the means to be there, but if you rely on another colleague who is near there, but you can develop network. I mean, we have seen that also, that trends with investigative journalists, and the example that is really working well. We also have seen, despite authoritarian regimes, how media themselves have been resisting, with the examples of Africanist press in Sierra Leone, La Voix de Djibouti in Djibouti, and many other media in exile are currently who are reporting from abroad and then giving reliable information with all its integrity on the situation of the country. Those media needs to be supported, and we think we need to stand up for those media. In any case, journalism itself will remain. Thank you.
Mohamed?
Yes, thank you. I mean, I really like the sort of, there's some kind of congruency that's already emerging now. Like if you count how many times we heard the word solidarity, how many times we heard the word initiative and taking matters into our own hands, filling in the vacuum that's probably now left by all these news organizations that got defunded or gutted on the African continent. It's a golden, entrepreneurial opportunity probably for people to start their own thing, no matter how small, and to try to maybe capture those audiences. And that's how things grow over time. One interesting thing about solidarity, which there's a particular quality to it that what Sadibou was saying reminded me of an anecdote that I heard from my colleagues at CPJ who are on the emergencies team. So they do our safety training, security training. There's a lot of mental support, a lot of emotional support, without mentioning, for safety reasons, without mentioning what's the country, who are the journalists from, all of that. Exiled journalists from a country that is undergoing some kind of unrest or conflict. Essentially, it was an opportunity to rest and come together and see each other. That's something that we organized or funded or co-funded with other partners. And it wasn't just the instrumental help of having somebody who's a mental health expert talking with journalists and making them feel more resilient. Those journalists were so happy to actually just see each other and be together in the same space and see and feel seen. And that alone was apparently just really energizing. Although they were technically exiled, they left families behind, probably on a moment's notice, essentially like refugees, and they're still trying to do journalism in exile. I mean, how demanding is that? And to have all that mental and emotional pull at the same time. So I think really finding ways for also, as William said, sort of intra-African advocacy, how to really max out that potential through the African Union or through any other mechanisms. Somehow African media practitioners, media leaders in general, trying to own the narrative around democracy and human rights instead of, having it always appear as though it's something coming from outside. And maybe there's a way to frame that for the local public opinion that these are African needs, these are African demands, these are African ways of working together, of collaborating together. And I think demographically, which may be a little bit outside of my lane, but, Africa is very young. And I think there's incredible energy and incredible passion on the African continent, whether it's North Africa, Sub-Saharan Africa, I don't like these divides, the entire African continent. I think there's enormous potential. I mean, even I would say where I come from in Egypt, the media ecosystem has been captured through many different mechanisms. But business-wise, there is an immense amount of innovation and creativity that is actually going on right now. So as a business, it didn't really die off. Obviously, they can't talk about everything they want to talk about, but there's enormous energy. So it's up to us to really figure out how do we take care of that and advance it. I love the ideas around the convening power, perhaps of universities. That's one thing universities are very, very good at, is to convene people, whether it's here in the US or on the continent. There's enormous potential in these networking opportunities. And William, Angela says hi, and Jonathan and everybody, and they say hi to everybody. So it's great to hear that nice feedback from you. Yeah, thank you.
Okay, so I think we can open it up for comments, questions, contributions from the room. Yes. Sharif, you want to say something? Okay.
Hi, so I really enjoyed this talk and then all the previous day as well. And I wanted to ask, I know we've spoken a lot about Africa being young and Africa being on the rise and the youth, but I wanted to know, like, what complementary role do all of you see, the more like macro, like the structures, like the government, policymakers, and like kind of facilitating that change for the young people as well?
Hi. Thank you so much for the very insightful talk that we've been hearing. I was wondering, sort of on a similar note, what do you think, like in terms of the youth and young people, what do you think the role of like social media and social media journalism might play in spreading knowledge and spreading information, sort of in the way that you all were talking about today?
You want to take that, or I can ask it? Oh, so mine is just a complimentary comment. The issue of Africa or Africans telling the African story came up a couple of times. And I want to focus on another dynamics that is currently happening and growing in Africa, and that is the foreign interference. It has always been the US, Europe and stuff, especially through the media, whether it's the VOA or BBC or RFI or France 24. But then now we've seen new players. Everybody's scrambling for Africa, making inroads in terms of interest. We've seen the rise of Russia. You go through Sahel protest in Burkina Faso and Mali, you see protesters waving proudly Russian flags. In Nigeria, you see young protesters in northern part of Nigeria raising Iranian flags. Then you have the Turkey making inroads very quickly through TRT wall. Now, I understand even that BBC Africa, a lot of young African journalists from Senegalese to Guineans to Malians who were working for BBC French service, BBC Afrique in Dakar have since left, and because they've been offered more opportunity, more pay with TRT wall for the Turkish. Of course, you have Chinese as well. I have opportunity of working for most of these people, and unless you are an insider, you think it's just because of the power of media, all these ethical issues and press freedom and but then there are always vested interest. And if you look at the political dynamics Africa today, you have, for example, in Somalia, Somaliland, the port of Berbera, everybody is scrambling, and the US, of course, probably will end up getting the biggest cake of the port of Berbera, because that gives them opportunity to be in a better position to fight the Houthis, and of course also watch over Iran. You have Israel also with vested interest there, UAE with vested interest there. You go to Sudan, the war in Sudan, UAE is there. Russia is there. Even Colombia, they're all there. Everybody is there. And this is across Africa. And for me, the issue is not just those with with financial powers, but especially if they have their media outlets in Africa. William was mentioning about African media, and I guess it's the context of not just little individual media outlets, but then a continent-based media that is powerful enough, that is with a lot of resources and power to tell the African story, to represent the interests of Africa. But then that has been tried over and over and over. It failed. And when in countries where big international mainstream media compete with local media, you end up having all of us. That's why we were not able to work for local media in our countries, because if RFI pays me much more than any media in Senegal can pay me, I will choose RFI. All the local media journalists, the best journalists across Africa, are working for this international media outlets with vested interests. So I just want to put that out there. That is, oftentimes we don't talk about it, but that is also, a threat to the future of democracy in Africa, because the more we have more players with vested interests, the more difficult it is for us to decide, because people decide for us what we want to be and what we want to do.
Okay, so I don't know. We can take comments. We can start. Fatou, you want to start?
Yeah, I want to. She was talking about the role the role social media plays to energize young people. I think that is the way forward now. We have seen that across countries, from Senegal to Nigeria to Gambia, where Kenya recently, how young people have mobilized themselves through social media, because it's not coordinated. Somebody sits there with a hashtag and they come together and, gather somewhere just to go against a regulation that is being passed at their parliaments or national assembly, something they are not. For example, in Kenya, they were going against the new tax laws that the government was putting, and it didn't go through because the young people mobilized. Yes, a lot of people died. People were arrested, but again, democracy is messy. The young people were able to stand up and go against those regulations and make their voices heard. And the government had to listen. The government had to listen. The president had to dissolve the entire cabinet after that crisis, and were able to solve some of their demands. So that's the power of social media. Like I said, in Gambia, we had these regulations where at some point they had increased the salary of the president. They increased salaries and allowances of the National Assembly. At some point, they were going to have laws passed to increase the salary of judges. And the young people said, no, what about us? It seems like you're just rewarding yourselves. So they mobilized themselves through social media and went to the National Assembly, made demands, and were advocating for more protests. At some point, the minister had to withdraw that bill. So the young people have used social media now across Africa. In Senegal, we have seen, I think, we have said all of us, Senegal is the biggest example for us in the West Africa sub-region. What they have done, what the young people have done to bring change to that country. Yes, over 80 people died from 2013 to the time they had elections. But it was what, nobody wants to die, obviously. But at the end of the day, they needed change. They wanted change in their country, and they achieved it. And it was very difficult. But it was led by young people, and it was through social media. I remember Macky Sall used to say, these people don't have supporters. They only have social media, young people in social media who don't even have votes. But for the first time, an opposition leader who everyone believed had only young people following him was able to win the election in first round, over 50% of the votes. And it was all inspired by young people on social media. So yes, the young people in Africa have really used social media to inspire change in their different countries.
William, you want to? William, do you?
Well, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. The issue of I didn't get the first question very well, but on the issue of the social media, I think my colleague from Gambia has tackled it very well. social media has become very, very useful as a mobilizing, space. And we have seen the case of Kenya and different other countries. And of course, even during the Arab Spring, the countries up there in the north and so on. And even in a country like Sudan now, the media is in shambles. Hundreds of journalists are out there, but they are mobilizing using social media, especially through, they have come up with something they call Sudan Media Forum. And they are going to every space, Addis Ababa, Nairobi. They are sharing a lot of information with us online in terms of what is going on and appealing for solidarity. Most of this would not have been possible without social media. So social media is useful to the media sector, but also in terms of civic engagement among the youth. If you look at the different social media platforms, the kind of conversations that are going on there is much more now issue-based. It is not, in Kenya we have, previously we used to have young people telling what in Kenya we call woye stories, young people, woye, meaning it was trivial. But right now that's not the case. You'll find that there are a lot of very issue-based conversations on taxation, on governance, on many other things, making demands and even using cartoons on social media that irritate leaders. Yeah, so social media has become a very, very powerful tool, and I think it's going to help alongside the legacy media in terms of holding authorities to account. Maybe the other thing I wanted to say is that in terms of part of what needs to happen, I think the innovation that the media sector in Africa needs to have is also in terms of local resource mobilization. Increasingly, we have a lot of Africans who have money. We have the Aliko Dangotes, we have many other people. We need to begin approaching them. I mean, where are they taking their money? Can they begin to channel some of this money to build a media ecosystem that is resilient enough? Because when we have business environment that is governed, when we have democracy in Africa, it facilitates their business. So we need to look at local resource mobilization. And last year, we had engagements with the African Development Bank. Increasingly, the African Development Bank is devoting resources towards supporting the media. The framework has not been developed very well, but the discussions are there. And they had a meeting. We had a meeting in Nairobi of what we call Africa Media Leaders Summit. And the president of the African Development Bank was there with his entire team. And we had discussions around the strategy and engagement in a very practical way about how they need to put some of the money within the media sector. And that, from the African Development Bank perspective, it cannot be, they have no interest like the state, that then we can say that they'll be able to influence the media negatively. And then, of course, maybe I need to add that as a way forward for strengthening the media and democracy in Africa, as I mentioned yesterday, we must be able to aggressively deal with the obsolete media laws. We must be able to engage the governments to engage, like through the Africa Media Lawyers Network, on looking at the laws that need to be repealed. So policy and legal reform within the media sector is very, very critical in terms of moving in terms of the way forward. Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, thank you, William and Chernoh. I would like to add in terms of analysis some facts also, so as to add to what Sheriff has just developed. It's about the context of the emergence of kind of other media from Russia or from other countries. We also, in terms of context, need to know that there is a kind of information war currently in our continent. That means what? That means for so long time, I mean, those countries, some of them have been colonized by England, and others by France, and others, a few of them by Portuguese, and so on. So if we go to West Africa, in the Sahel, for example, currently there is now, for so long time, the Radio France International has been there. They have appointed people there, and France 24, and so and so, for so long time. But since the arrival of the militaries into power, we have seen a surge of kind of anti-French sentiment feeling, with a lot of protests, with Russian flag, with other flags. And then those international correspondents has been directly targeted, and then with people, some of those leading the protests, saying also these journalists must go. And then we have documented a lot of those situations. Up to now, there is no longer French correspondent there, and then that has created a kind of empty space in terms of covering all those information. And in light of that, we have seen the development of a Russian propaganda agency, African Initiative, which for so long time has been working into the Central African Republic, and now with its own satellite media, and some of which have been are factist media. And now they have spreads with the Russian propaganda into those countries, with a strategy to enter the country and occupy, the narrative. First of all, they have just chased all the international French correspondents, suspended some other outlet like BBC and so. And now the space is empty, and they are there with their own narratives, and also with the support sometimes of the juntas, the possibility to go up to the north, escorted, embedded by the militaries to go and cover. In the last 2 years, all the images or all the situation in the north has been covered by RT Russia today, for example. And now we also have the similar example with all those who are also trying, those countries like Turkey, with TRT also trying to develop also their own presence, because the space is quite empty. Chinese also are doing that, but Chinese are doing so in a more wise way. For example, without less noise in comparison to what the Russians they have done. The Russians, they have offered positions with high salaries, with a lot of to young African, very brave African journalists, most of whom they have decided to leave the some independent media where they have been working for, and so guys to join that. And this is how the narrative and the spirit chance will work, and then will work slowly. And we also have noticed the emergence of a lot of factist media outlets also, maintained by those Russian media also in the media landscape, with a lot of sparking a lot of disinformation and a lot of attacks against all those who are dissenting voices, all those who are not in favor with what all those authoritarian regimes they want. This is also something which has taken place, sparking a lot of disinformation, a lot of attacks, a lot of occupation, and this is quite problematic also taking into place. And now they are full in the Sahelian countries, but now they are trying to spread up north, up to Central African, to Central Africa. I'll use a country like Equatorial Guinea, where they have started. When they come to a country, they just start with some trainings. For example, they come with some to offer some trainings to journalists, and they start with that. When they start with that, they will trying to recruit some people so as to go and join their newsrooms. Actually, we have they have set up even the Russian language. For example, in a country like Burkina Faso, they have a kind of a memorandum of agreement with a radio station to broadcast some Russian program. This is quite difficult in an African context, where African language. Some of them have not been broadcast for many time, and this is a strategy which is part of the influence and disinformation propaganda strategy led by some Africans. There is a media which I can quote, which is called Afric Media, and which is a satellite media of African Initiative, and then many of those the information they are publishing are propaganda information or disinformation information. This is also the reality, and it's challenging for those who believe in on an independent media, truths for the media, independence, quality of information, integrity of information. This is quite challenging, and that's why it's a challenge for all those who believe on reliable information to debunk all those they have been doing. But the reality is quite true. They have been recruiting a lot of young African journalists an average pay salary of, which is quite interesting in comparison with what is happening in the market.
Yeah, no, and I think that makes the mission of African media practitioners, journalists, media entrepreneurs really more urgent, right? Mm-hmm. You need to fill in that space before it gets filled by somebody else. Want to pick up on something really important and powerful that William said. We should be able to find a way to make the case for journalism with African leaders, influencers across all domains. Great idea here. How do you tell investors this is, a democratic place is better for business? A free press is good for society. There's this notion of how do we explain the social value of journalism in any society, not just on the African continent. The former executive director of CPJ, Jules Simon, had a really nice monograph. You should go check it out online. Shortly after he stepped down from CPJ, talking exactly about that. Is that a lot of human rights organizations, press freedom organizations for decades, their strategy is let's make noise, let's name and shame, let's critique, let's criticize. And I don't think we should stop doing that. Yeah. But on top of that, we should find a way to make the case for why journalism matters in the public interest for everyday people and for governments who want to maintain a cohesive, stable, peaceful society, and who just a lot of the time happen to be a little bit too insecure, a little bit too nervous, which is the story of all these other dictatorships, on the continent and everywhere. But there is, and I'm not saying by any means, the putschists, those who start coups, the autocrats, the juntas, those people are not going to be persuaded by anything. Those people are, there's no point talking to them in any gentle manner. There's a wide, happy middle that I think there is an opportunity for persuasion, for some kind of private engagement, private diplomacy over time. We see some interesting results sometimes, with countries that are sort of a hybrid or, a democracy on the retreat. It's not fully authoritarian yet, but, sometimes if you advocate certain things privately, there is some payoff. But I think there's a powerful case for journalism to be made by all Africans on the continent to at least, lessen sort of any antagonistic sort of relationship between the press and those in power. And, that doesn't mean that journalists should stop holding those in power to account by any means. But it's something I think worth pursuing. Yeah.
Well, before I turn it to the room, I want to add one or two comments, if I can use the prerogative to do that. One is in response or in connection to what Sheriff was talking about with the geopolitical landscape. And this is troubling in the sense that the competition for resources, competition for geopolitical space has become so intense that sometimes even the identity of these corporations or whether they are news agencies or companies is very difficult to entangle. And I have been shocked looking at corporations, looking at these trends, especially in the Sahel and following the coups. You find companies that are supposedly Turkish, registered in Turkey, operating, for example, in Senegal. The Suma Group will be one. Now it's I think it's called FB Group. It has gone, transformed to FB Group. So when you look at finance capital, you find it's is actually just satellited in Turkey, but operating so it goes like a Turkish company. So this is an invitation that we have to, I think for the longest time, I've been caught within that geopolitical lens coming from post-1945. And now when I look at it, I say, oh, no, wait a minute, I've missed something here, because the actual identity of these companies and whether they're news agencies, the more you look into them, you find different players and different routes. So in other words, we have to, as journalists, be critical in terms of what looks like a flag in Guinea that is from France or Russia or China, and begin to look at how did the flag end up in this place? Not to just look at an image in Mali and accept the image as face value or a voice. I think this is a reality that, and for me, what it forced me to do is to even disengage from writing for international news outlets now, because I don't know, how you get positions. For the last 5 years, I refused to send even an opinion piece to friends editing or working for various European or other outlets. And even when I get requests, it becomes a problem, because sometimes you publish in a given outlet, you risk being boxed into these geopolitical frontiers. So I zeroed my attention just to Sierra Leone, because I became, as somebody who was looking for a larger region, continental, now I'm forced to look micro-national, because I cannot distinguish between who is who now in this convoluted crisis landscape. So I just wanted to, I don't know if you've encountered some of these, like these kind of things, and it's really problematic. I don't know if it's a problem you are dealing with also.
That segues really well into a question that I was thinking of yesterday, and maybe it's time for it, which is, we've talked a lot about democracy, but we haven't talked about capitalism and like the ultra-capitalist, post-capitalist world, if you will, that we find ourselves in. And is it really about democracy anymore? Or is it about, I'm going to say it, fighting capitalism? When you think about media outlets, or frankly, even universities at some level, at what point are we really talking about multinational corporations? The Washington Post is Jeff Bezos now. So with the ironic tagline of democracy dies in darkness, it's not Katharine Graham's newspaper anymore. The Murdochs bought the London Times, the Wall Street Journal, and other outlets. TV news can be privately owned. What do we do with all that? And then when we think about possible Russian, Chinese, Turkish influence on the continent, we know we've had Russian influence in elections here. Pretty sure it's happened in Europe. The Romanians reversed an election over the potential of Russian interference. How do we put all those pieces back into the puzzle?
Any further comment, question before we turn it to the panelists or the round table? Yes.
Well, thank you. I just had a kind of similar question that was kind of percolating as all of you guys were talking. But it just basically following on from that, when there is such a pervasive understanding of these conflicts of interest and global systems of power tied largely to powerful nation states and ultra-capitalist systems, how do we, where is the place of solidarity? And how can we think through, and how do you guys think through, unions and places where people can coexist together and find ways to be independent journalists and find ways to have some real
proper both critique of systems of power and also enact care for the lives at stake in light of all of this?
So we can, if no question, then we can, any one of you can start. Yeah.
It's not like a contribution, but like there's something uneasy sometimes, and I think the contributions are very valid. Like we see it. People who repress journalists, governments who repress journalists, really hail from all ideologies.
Yeah.
Like socialists in power, capitalists in power, libertarian, center-right, center left, Muslim, Christian, Buddhist, atheist. It's of all flavors.
Good.
And what if somebody writes commentary, right, that is critical of those in power, but then the view of those who are in power are no, it's actually, this is the way of the revolution. If you're against the revolution, you're not one of us. And there are consequences to these things. I mean, we see it in China. We see it in countries under sort of the Chinese sphere of influence in East Asia, Southeast Asia. It's sometimes I feel concerned by those tendencies, which are really well intentioned, to liberate people, to give people more freedoms, and so on and so forth. And then all of a sudden, boom, it kicks into full blown authoritarianism. And enemies of the people, right? Like what kind of rhetoric that we have here, right? It's here now. Trump is saying media is enemies of the people. How many leaders belonging to which ideologies in the 20th century have said the exact same thing? Many, from all flavors, right? So I think, and that might result obviously later on in journalists getting attacked, imprisoned, defamed, that sort of thing. So I think let's keep a space for journalism that is able to do its job, agnostic of who the journalism is talking about. I think that's very important.
I just wanted to just pick up on what Anne said about having the rich and influential people owning media organizations. I think he also mentioned something like that. The impact of that also can be bad because business people have vested interests and they always want to have favors from governments. We have seen in the elections when Jeff didn't want to endorse, but the Washington Post has always endorsed candidates. The editorial board had those decisions. But for his business interests, he didn't want that. So sometimes we also have a media outlet in our country, which we didn't know, but we were told one of the powerful business have the majority shares now in that organization. And the president gets to know about that. Sometimes, they can use their influence to buy media organizations so that they can always use that power to get contracts and businesses from government. So at the end of the day, you are just an employee. You're just working for these organizations. So they make the decision. They look at their business interests. So there's also, in as much as we want them to invest in media organizations, but there's also this risk of them taking away your leverage of just being independent. So that also might be something that can be also concerning. So I don't know where the balance is, but yeah.
From my part, I think we need to develop and show more solidarity for those who inform us, journalists, because I believe journalists are the one who inform us, and this is quite crucial and capital. We also need to be sometimes very passionate because it is not a kind of straightforward battle or struggle. I have personally met a lot of African leaders. At the beginning, it started with a lot of optimistic views, but it ends most of the time with a lot of pessimistic views. I have met people who said, okay, we're gonna release the journalist. I will ask the prosecutor to release the journalist probably tomorrow by 6 p.m. And the journalist ended up by spending a month or more in prison. This is also the lying dimensions of those people we meet. But however the situation is, I believe solidarity is important because the type of work journalists themselves are doing in the continent is quite different of the type of work political actors are doing, scientists sometimes are doing, other people also are doing, because it's a public interest work, which is information. It's not given to anyone to inform other people. And on behalf of that, we believe these need to be protected. These need to be also encouraged. These need to be given their recognition. In French, we will say reconnaissance. I don't know. I think it's recognition in the whole society, in the whole society, on behalf of what they have been doing, what they are doing for us. I think this is why I still stand in all this. Thank you,
William. Okay, we have Alex. Let's take Alex, then we come to William.
Thanks a lot. Yeah, I was just wondering about all these discussions we had about, but also some that we are doing the panels, but some that we are doing coffee breaks, which are not always the same discussions. And we've been talking a lot about these global networks, and that kind of became like the legacy media. Now you have the legacy global networks that we've mentioned before, that are based in the US or that are based in the EU. How about making a global network rooted in Africa? How about that? To use the same models that these international journalists that are actually mostly based in the US or Western Europe, why not rooting a global network on the African continent? And could it be possible? So that it doesn't only belong to these specific actors that are monopolizing the sector in the non-profit scene.
Okay, William?
Yeah, I think in terms of, I think Sharif was talking about, African journalists and the choices they make, whether, international media organizations are paying better and that kind of thing. Of course, not everybody can work for the international media. So we have diverse media in Africa, some of them serving, local communities and so on. And already, I think we already indicated that thousands of journalists are putting their lives on the line just to inform their communities. And some of them are without pay. So there is the bigger call for communication, for journalism, for advocacy, and for holding leaders accountable beyond maybe the salary that you can get from the media. I'm sure that when Fatou came back to Gambia and started on the kind of minimal, arrangement that she could have chosen to probably look for international media to work for. Yeah, but there is a calling that we must make clear also to African journalists in terms of saying now, hey, look, there is something we need to do, even if the situation is very, very difficult. Of course, our colleagues can continue working for international media, but I think the call is for them to have a realization about what kind of agenda is being driven by, the different media that that they work for. And how is it serving? Because we are not merely conveyor belts for what they want. And this brings me to the point of saying that, you see, Africa has always been a contested space. What we have now is like another Berlin Conference of 1884 with the different powers coming to try to have a grab at Africa, resources and peddling influences. And in this case, yet they're not carving out colonies for themselves, but they are using their contacts here and influencing governments to try to have their spaces here. So those contestations will come. Now, I think it's the responsibility of African journalists to navigate those difficulties and say, amid all those challenges and the interests that are coming from Russia, from China, or from Western Europe, or from America, because they will always have those competing interests. And that is why even in the Congo will never have peace from the time Hamas Joel died and up to now. I mean, we know the powers that are interested in the Congo. So we as journalists, what is the kind of story that we are putting out there that should be able to inspire Africans, should be able to change the situation that we are talking about? So my own thinking is that there is a bigger duty, there's a bigger call for the African journalists, and as we are mobilizing to move forward, if we want, because our interests as journalists are inexplicably linked to the improvement of governance and democracy. Because if you are saying that the environment is not good enough, that it's not facilitative for journalists, then we really must work on the governance framework. We must engage the government. I get what Mohamed has talked about, because it is not all the time, especially in terms of advocacy organizations, that we make noise that succeeds. There have been instances, and I've been in missions. I think, Sadibou, we were able to get journalists in Burundi out of jail by engaging the government then. And we were even allowed to go into prisons, in the upper region of Moramvia to see those who are held there. So different tactics ought to come into play to engage. And right now, we have a signature media event called the African Media Convention. We are going to the fourth one. And we increasingly see African governments and their representatives, ministries of information, and others coming to that space. We are able to engage some of them and say, hey, look, this and that is not doing very well in your country. Or sometimes when we go to Banjul at the African Commission on Peoples and Human Rights, we can present shadow reports that on the side, they begin to engage you to say, hey, look, is there something we can do together? Because they don't like being exposed in forums like that. So they would rather want to discuss with you. So the approach will be multi-pronged, in my opinion. So I think there is something we can do in terms of the strategies, in terms of passion, in terms of the courage that we need to deploy to try to improve both the media freedom and also the democracy space in Africa.
Yes, Sadibou, you want to add?
Yes, I just would like to second William on the tactics. I think sometimes also tactics works well, and from the outside, people or many observers, they think organizations are just putting out statement. I mean, the issue is not that there. There is a kind of lot of hidden work, non-publicly available work we are doing. I think that's the case also for CPG, with the possibility sometimes if a journalist is arrested or is threatened, the possibility to call to the Inspector General of Police to request a kind of personal protection, or to call the prosecutor, or to call a minister, and so sometimes tactics works. Tactics also works at an international level, at the level of ACPHR, where there is sessions from time to time where you can go and try to engage directly with those countries, because there are a lot of countries where which are really close countries, but where you are in an open conference or open sessions, you can go and meet the Human Rights Commissioner. You can go and meet directly the minister who is representing the country there, and develop some engagement. And most of that create relationships. And sometimes they will be also able to understand the kind of job your organizations also are doing. We also have a lot of possibility to do seizure of the African Commission of People's Rights Commissioner on press freedom, on freedom of expression, and access to information, because those are African Union staffs, and they have the possibility to use other mechanisms. And those mechanisms, most of the time, if they give you feedback, it really works. For example, there are a lot of situation people they can arrange using tactics. Unfortunately, some tactics might be blocked by the unwillingness of some authorities who are extraordinarily close, and that you will have to make public a statement, and bring witnesses from the international community, so to let them know, okay, look, we are putting you in front of your responsibility because you have done this. This is what I want to do.
Okay. Well, I think we have 7 minutes left to the end of this panel. I don't know if we can just,
comment based on the last kind of interchange. Earlier today, I tried to push this idea that there's a kind of political dimension to quote unquote independent journalism, and that what I heard over the last day and a half is that there's this somewhat of a shared political moral agenda that undergirds a lot of what everyone here does. And I still think that's true, but I think part of what I heard, is William articulated it very well. The idea that there's a calling, that doing this independent journalism well is more than just a job. It's more than just an ideology. Mm-hmm. There's a kind of a calling to it. There's an intersection of the moral and the political. But I think the other thing I've heard over the last day and a half is that being a good independent journalist is also a craft. Right. It's a tool. It's a skill. And so I'm not, I still think that there's a political, moral calling dimension of being a good journalist. But it seems to me that part of what I've heard as you guys have talked over the last day and a half is that to do it well, you can't just let your politics, your morality, your view of the world guide what you do with your journalism. Sadibou has said many times, there's a story, it's newsworthy. There's a truth that you're trying to portray, even if you recognize in the background that truths are socially constructed and politics undergird everything. But there's something I think that you've all conveyed about what independent journalism is. I don't know what the right word is, but I use the word craft, right? It's a skill, it's a craft. There's a way to do it that no matter what your politics is, you guys can look and say, this is good journalism, this is not good journalism. And it's the calling is to use it and use it properly in the service of that moral and political commitment that you have, that other kind of calling. So that's kind of what I've gotten out of the discussion, and it's brought me to, I think, a kind of hopeful place for this at the end.
So I think with that, I will have to use the opportunity to thank I know there will be more comments and more follow-up to this conversation regarding what are the next steps out of this conference. We've been talking on the sidelines about different ideas, but we would like to do follow-up actions moving forward. This conversation, I'm hoping, will continue. But before maybe we can continue this, as we move in the next couple of days, thinking about everything that we've discussed. But I want to thank, personally, Professor Daniel Smith for the support that I've received since I arrived here as a postdoctoral research associate in the Africa Initiative. This would not have been possible to bring together journalists from Africa, Europe, and people that we know already who've interacted. Everybody that's here is here because we had the support of the director of the Africa Initiative. So I want to use the opportunity to thank you for that. Yeah, personally, I think this is it's a healing exercise, being in the gathering with colleagues. I consider my own journalism as a community service, a service that I do, community service, lending my skills, my expertise and knowledge into the community for things that I believe in, things that I care about, which I think also affect the greater majority of the people I care about. So I want to thank everyone that also accepted the invitation to travel. Here is a long way I want to thank also William.
Yes.
He's been very patient and it's 7 hours.
Yeah, so
Yeah, 7 hours time difference. So late in Kenya. So
he's a good
yeah, we salute your courage and commitment. and you know, I want to leave the other thank yous and closing remarks for Professor Smith.
So I asked Yeah, I thanked Christy at the very beginning, and when I saw her after lunch, I told her to come down here at the end to be thanked by all of us. She might still walk in the next 2 minutes or so, so I'll save the thank you for her in the hopes that after I say a few words to all of you and about Chernoh, that she'll show up. And if she doesn't, we'll thank her in her absence. So I also wanted to thank William because William had this word calling, and his commitment to being here from Nairobi after having his visa denied for no good reason at the embassy, where they didn't even look at his letter of invitation, didn't even look at the what the conference was. They just said, "Oh, you have no reason to come back." I mean, you can't have a visa. The person who denied the visa that didn't even know what he was coming for, and of course, some of his colleagues, I mean, in defense of some remnants of good things in the American embassy and the kind of thing that Fatou said about, now that you can't go to the American embassy to say, hey, look at what's happening in my country and think that it's an ally. There's still people who are working in embassies and who are part of the American government and so on, who are your allies. We're just not in control right now. And from what I heard from Chernoh, apparently some of William's friends in the embassy were upset and not happy that he was denied a visa. So it's not all one thing what's happening in this country. But I want to thank all of you for coming and joining us. It's been such a fertile and constructive and as someone pointed out, very, very healing kind of thing. But before I thank Chris, maybe let's thank Christy again. Christy. No, you didn't miss anything. We thank you so much. I mean, I think we all recognize the kind of work that takes place in the background of something like this, the logistics, the travel, the questions, the money, making sure everyone got their transportation, and we're all leaving now, but Christy's work isn't over when you guys send your receipts and need your reimbursements and so on. Her work starts from the beginning and goes to the end. So thank you so much, Christy. Yeah, yes, thank you so much, Errol. And then finally, I just want to say a few words about Chernoh. So as I said in the opening day, he's our inaugural postdoctoral fellow at the Africa Initiative. And part of what I tried to do when convincing the Watson Institute to support having a postdoctoral fellow was have it be the first step in hiring more faculty who work on Africa, especially Africans who work on Africa. And Chernoh's energy, his commitment, his ability to be simultaneously an investigative journalist doing his weekly podcasts and fending off the interference of the Sierra Leonean government and opponents of his, and all the while teaching his class, writing his history, working on his book manuscript, which I'm pushing to get out the door as quickly as possible. All of that has been so impressive, and we're lucky enough that he's going to be here another year as well. So this conference, literally, I mean, Chernoh, we've thanked Christy, we've thanked me, he's thanked me, I've thanked you, but Chernoh, it was the driving force behind this conference. Everyone who was invited, he picked you, he invited you, you all know him, and we benefited tremendously from his networks and his connections with you. So thank you for coming, but especially thank you for Chernoh.